Daniel Hayes had always considered himself predictable, a man who followed routines, trusted logic, and kept his emotions arranged in neat, quiet boxes. Yet on that particular night, walking through the dim, rain-glazed streets after dinner with old college friends, he could sense something shifting inside him. The air felt heavier. His thoughts felt louder. And the growing confusion he had been trying to silence for months was beginning to demand attention. Lucas Myles walked beside him, hands tucked into the pockets of his dark jacket, shoulders slightly tense as if he was carrying a secret that refused to stay hidden. Lucas had always been the unpredictable one between them, the type who smiled easily, spoke freely, and treated vulnerability as a form of honesty rather than danger. But tonight, his silence was unusual. Daniel heard it more clearly than the distant traffic. "Thanks for coming," Lucas said finally, his voice soft but weighted. "I didn't realize I needed tonight until everyone left." Daniel nodded. "I get it. It was good seeing everyone again." But the truth was, the whole evening had felt unreal to him. Emily had been texting him earlier, telling him she might work late again. He had responded politely, but part of him felt disconnected, as if her messages were background noise. He hated that feeling, and yet he didn't know how to stop it. Every time he tried to focus on what they had, his mind drifted toward the person now walking just a few steps ahead of him. Lucas slowed down as they reached his apartment building. He looked up, exhaled deeply, then pushed the door open and gestured for Daniel to enter. Daniel followed without question. He had been here before, but something about tonight felt different, sharper, almost cinematic. Inside, the apartment was dim except for a warm amber lamp glowing from the corner. Soft instrumental music hummed under the tension between them. Lucas dropped his keys into a bowl by the door and turned toward Daniel, leaning slightly against the wall as if gathering the courage to speak. "You want something to drink?" Lucas asked. Daniel shook his head. "No. I'm good." Lucas studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Sit. I need to say something, and I don't want you standing awkwardly when I do." Daniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He sat on the edge of the couch, hands clasped, trying to read Lucas's expression. But Lucas paced instead, restless, like a man rehearsing sentences he feared would change everything. Finally, Lucas stopped. "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" he asked quietly. "Like the version of yourself people know isn't the real one?" Daniel blinked. The question was unexpected but uncomfortably familiar. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I think everyone does." "That's not what I meant." Lucas's voice cracked slightly. "I mean, do you ever want something you're not supposed to want?" The silence that followed felt enormous. Daniel's heartbeat thudded in his chest, loud and unsteady. He didn't know what Lucas was asking, or maybe he did, and that was precisely why he suddenly felt breathless. "Lucas," Daniel began carefully. "What's going on?" Lucas laughed faintly, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I'm tired, Daniel. Tired of holding things in. Tired of pretending I don't see things I do. And tired of wondering if I'm the only one confused." There it was, the crack in the wall Daniel had spent months pretending wasn't there. He swallowed hard. "Am I missing something?" Daniel asked, though he already sensed the answer. Lucas walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "I need to ask you something," he said. "And you don't have to answer right away. But I need to know if I'm imagining this, or if there's something between us you've been avoiding too." Daniel held his breath. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. Lucas continued, voice low, steady. "Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to follow your heart, even if it complicates everything?" The question hung between them, trembling like a fragile truth. Daniel felt the floor beneath him tilt. He thought of Emily, her devotion, her patience, her trust. And then he thought of Lucas, his warmth, his sincerity, the way their conversations always felt effortless. Emotional clarity had never felt so far away. Daniel started, but stopped. Words felt dangerous. But silence felt dishonest. Lucas waited. Daniel stared at the lamp's soft glow. He could hear his own breathing, shallow and uneven. The walls he built around his emotions were cracking under the weight of the question. He didn't want to hurt anyone. He didn't want to betray anyone. Yet the truth was pressing against him, refusing to stay buried. "Lucas," Daniel whispered, "I have wondered. More than I should." Lucas closed his eyes, as if bracing for impact. "That's all I needed to hear." Daniel stood, unable to sit still. He felt dizzy, guilty, relieved, terrified. "I didn't mean to confuse anything," he said. "I've been trying so hard to understand myself." "I know," Lucas replied softly. "I've seen you fighting it. I didn't ask because I wanted something from you. I asked because pretending isn't fair to either of us." Daniel nodded slowly, feeling the truth settle like a weight on his chest. He suddenly realized that the answer he gave, simple as it was, had opened a door he might not be ready to walk through. "I should go," Daniel whispered. Lucas didn't argue. He only stepped back, giving Daniel space. "All right. But whatever happens next, just be honest with yourself. That's all." Daniel walked toward the door, pausing once before stepping into the hallway. Lucas stood there silently, his expression unreadable, hopeful, hurt, relieved, and afraid all at once. Daniel left the apartment, the cool night air hitting him like a shock. He stood on the sidewalk, staring at the quiet street, trying to breathe. His world hadn't shattered, but it had shifted, tilting toward a truth he wasn't ready to face but could no longer ignore. As he walked home slowly, each step echoing with the same question Lucas had asked: what happens when following your heart means risking everything else? And for the first time, Daniel realized he didn't know the answer, but he needed to find it. Daniel Hayes tried to return to normal. He told himself he could compartmentalize his emotions, tuck away the confusing, dangerous feelings that Lucas had awakened, and continue his life with Emily as if nothing had shifted. But the nights were restless, and the days were fragmented. His thoughts lingered too long on Lucas's quiet intensity, on the vulnerability in his voice, and on the subtle way his presence seemed to make the world sharper, more immediate. Emily Carter noticed it first in the small things, the way Daniel's responses came slower, the way his eyes sometimes glazed over mid-conversation, and how he occasionally seemed to drift into thought mid-laugh. She confronted him gently one evening, while they prepared dinner together in their modest kitchen. "You've been distant," she said, placing a hand on his forearm. "Is something bothering you?" Daniel froze for a moment, feeling the weight of honesty pressing against his chest. He forced a smile, nodding, "Just tired, I guess. Work's been a lot lately." Emily studied him for a moment, not fully convinced, then shrugged and returned to chopping vegetables. Daniel wanted to tell her the truth, wanted to explain that his mind was elsewhere, caught in a current he hadn't asked for, but he didn't. Instead, he swallowed the confession and buried it deep, even as it ached in his chest. Meanwhile, Lucas had become an inescapable presence in Daniel's thoughts. He found himself calling Lucas under the pretense of casual conversation more often than he intended, lingering on the sound of his voice. Their discussions were long, meandering, and intense, touching on dreams, fears, and small, intricate observations about the world. There was an intimacy to these moments, one that Daniel had never experienced with Emily, yet he felt a pang of guilt each time he laughed too easily or lingered too long in these conversations. One rainy afternoon, Daniel found himself walking aimlessly through the city, phone in hand, Lucas's name blinking on the screen. He debated whether to call or leave the message unsent, torn between desire and restraint. Eventually, curiosity and longing won, and he tapped the call button. "Hey," Lucas answered almost immediately, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to seep into Daniel's chest. "Hey," Daniel replied, unsure how to start. "I wanted to talk." "About what?" Lucas asked, his tone careful, gentle, inviting. Daniel hesitated. "Everything. I guess. About us, about me." A pause on the other end, then Lucas said softly, "You don't have to say anything you're not ready for." But Daniel was ready, even if he didn't fully know what that meant. He talked about the unease he felt in his own life, the growing distance between him and Emily, and the fear of betrayal. not toward her, but of betraying his own emotions. Lucas listened without interruption, only occasionally prompting him with a word, a sigh, or a question that made Daniel think deeper. "You've been holding yourself back," Lucas said finally. "You're afraid to admit that there's more to your heart than the path you've been walking." Daniel felt a shiver run through him. Lucas's words were both a comfort and a reminder of everything he had been avoiding. "I don't know what to do," he admitted. "I feel guilty, and yet I can't ignore this." "You don't have to decide now," Lucas said. "Just, be honest with yourself. That's the first step." The weeks that followed were a delicate, unspoken balancing act. Daniel continued to meet Emily for dinners, maintain their routines, and present the facade of normalcy. Yet in between, he found ways to meet Lucas for coffee, or for walks under quiet, lamplit streets, or late-night conversations that lasted until the world outside was empty and silent. Each meeting was charged with a subtle tension, a fragile honesty that left him exhilarated and terrified all at once. One evening, as Daniel walked toward a small cafe they often frequented, he found Lucas already waiting, hands stuffed in his coat pockets, eyes scanning the street until they landed on him. Daniel felt his chest tighten as he approached. "Hi," he said, voice low, almost hesitant. "Hey," Lucas replied, stepping aside so Daniel could sit across from him. "You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world." "I have been," Daniel admitted. "I'm trying to figure things out. About Emily, about us, about myself." Lucas nodded, leaning forward slightly. "It's okay to feel that way. You're not doing anything wrong by noticing your own heart." Daniel looked down at his hands. He wanted to believe that, but the guilt pressed into him like cold stone. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered. "Even when I'm with her." Lucas's expression softened. "I'm not asking you to leave anyone. I needed you to know that you're not alone in this. That these feelings aren't something to be ashamed of." For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to breathe, to acknowledge that what he felt wasn't fleeting, wasn't trivial. But as he left the cafe later, walking alone under the wet streetlights, he realized how fragile everything had become. Every word, every glance, every late-night conversation built a bridge between him and Lucas, yet at the same time, it widened the gap between him and Emily. The tension came to a head one evening when Daniel returned home to find Emily sitting on the couch, her eyes carefully observing him. There was no anger, only quiet concern. "I found a message from Lucas," she said calmly, her voice steady. "It wasn't anything explicit, but it made me feel uneasy." "Are you hiding something from me?" Daniel's throat tightened. This was the moment he had feared, the moment honesty would demand more than he was ready to give. He opened his mouth, then closed it, words failing him. The truth hovered in the air, unspoken yet unmistakable. I don't know," he whispered finally. "I think I've been confused." Emily's gaze didn't waver. She reached out, placing a hand on his. "I just want the truth, Daniel. Whatever that is. I need to know where we stand." That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Lucas, every subtle change in his own feelings, every word unspoken to Emily. He understood now that emotional boundaries could be just as dangerous as physical ones, and that a heart divided between honesty and loyalty could hurt more than any overt betrayal. He realized that he was at a crossroads. One path promised clarity, self-awareness, and the difficult process of confronting his own heart. The other promised comfort, familiarity, and a slow, almost imperceptible erosion of truth. And as the city hummed softly outside his window, Daniel knew that he couldn't remain in this middle ground forever. Sooner or later, a decision would have to be made, a choice that would define not only his relationship with Emily, but also the fragile bond with Lucas that had begun to grow, quietly, in the spaces he hadn't noticed until it was impossible to ignore. The night closed around him, heavy with possibility, as he whispered to himself, "I have to be honest, even if it changes everything." Daniel Hayes woke to the muted light of morning filtering through the blinds, the city outside cloaked in a quiet haze. The previous night had offered no resolution, only a relentless looping of conversations, glances, and unspoken truths. The tension he had carried for weeks had settled into a heavy ache, one that demanded confrontation. He knew, with a clarity that startled him, that evasion had reached its limit. He could no longer tiptoe around the lives he had intertwined with, Emily's, Lucas's, and his own. Emily Carter sat at the small kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee between her hands. She looked up as he entered, her expression calm yet firm, carrying the weight of someone who had been sensing a fracture in her world for too long. "We need to talk," she said. No accusation, no anger, just a quiet demand for honesty. Daniel swallowed, feeling the knot in his throat tighten. He perched on the chair opposite her, hands folded, searching for the right words. I've been avoiding the truth," he admitted, voice low, "and that's been unfair to you. I care about you, Emily, but I haven't been completely honest about my feelings. About myself." Emily's eyes didn't waver. "Go on," she said softly. Her patience was steady, but Daniel sensed the underlying pain that he exhaled slowly. "I've realized. I've been emotionally attached to someone else. It's not physical, but it's real, and it's made me confused about where I stand with you. I should have said something sooner, but I was afraid of losing you, afraid of losing myself." Emily's hand brushed his. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered, almost more to herself than to him. "I don't think I could have handled lies. But I need to know, what does this mean for us?" Daniel's chest tightened. He wanted to stay, to repair, to cling to the comfort they had built over years. But he knew the truth, he couldn't offer her the honesty and clarity she deserved while harboring a divided heart. "It means," he said carefully, "that we need to take a step back. We both deserve a chance to understand who we are and what we truly want." Emily nodded, a mixture of sorrow and understanding washing over her face. "I've suspected for a while that something was different," she admitted. "It hurts, yes, but I'd rather face reality than live in a comfortable lie. Maybe this is our chance to be honest, with ourselves and with each other." Leaving Emily that morning felt heavier than any confrontation he had anticipated. Yet the weight was tempered by the strange relief of truth spoken aloud. He wandered the streets, the city buzzing with life around him, while his mind replayed Lucas's face, the vulnerability, the quiet encouragement, the unspoken bond that had been forming between them. That he found himself dialing Lucas's number before he even realized it, phone trembling slightly in his hand. The call connected almost immediately. "Daniel," Lucas said, voice warm but cautious. "Everything okay?" "No," Daniel admitted. "I need to talk. I need to be honest, finally." Lucas's silence was patient, waiting for him to speak without interruption. "I'm listening," he said softly. Daniel recounted the conversation with Emily, the difficult but necessary acknowledgement of the truth. "I can't ignore what I feel for you, Lucas," he said finally. "But I also can't rush into anything. I need to understand myself first, and I don't want to hurt anyone more than I already have." Lucas exhaled, a mixture of relief and concern threading his tone. "That's fair," he said. "I don't want to pressure you. I want you to be true to yourself, whatever that path looks like. And I'll be here, honestly, without expectation, if you need me." The honesty in Lucas's words was both comforting and terrifying. Daniel realized that emotional honesty could be as powerful as physical connection, perhaps even more so. It demanded patience, reflection, and courage, and he had spent so long avoiding it that the weight of it now felt almost sacred. Over the following weeks, Daniel focused on introspection. He spent mornings walking the quiet streets, notebooks in hand, capturing thoughts that had previously been suppressed. He analyzed his emotions, trying to disentangle guilt from desire, loyalty from authenticity, and fear from understanding. Each realization brought clarity, though it also brought its own kind of ache, the ache of recognizing the fragility of human connections, the impact of emotional choices, and the responsibility one carries when hearts are involved. He returned to Emily once more, not to rekindle or plead, but to offer closure. They met in the park where they had once shared quiet picnics and long conversations. Daniel spoke with calmness, gratitude threading his voice. "I don't want to leave things unsaid," he said. "You've been more patient and loving than I could have asked for. I hope you find happiness, and I hope someday we can look back at this with understanding, not regret." Emily nodded, a small, sad smile forming. "I hope so too," she said. "Thank you for being honest. It hurts, yes, but I respect the courage it took to face yourself and me. That's more than most can manage." After leaving Emily, Daniel felt the first spark of clarity he had experienced in months. He called Lucas again, not because he had figured everything out, but because he was ready to be fully honest. He arrived at Lucas's apartment, heart pounding, mind racing, but calm in a way that had eluded him for weeks. Lucas opened the door and looked at him with a cautious, hopeful expression. "Hey," he said simply. Daniel took a deep breath. "I don't know exactly where this will lead," he admitted, "but I want to be truthful with you from now on. About who I am, what I feel, and what I'm ready for. I need to start by being honest, even if it's messy or uncertain." Lucas nodded slowly. "That's all I've ever asked," he said, voice steady and sincere. "We'll figure it out together, one step at a time. No pressure. Just truth." Daniel felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel hope, tempered with patience. The road ahead was uncertain, emotional boundaries still to be explored, and choices still to be made. But there was no longer avoidance, no longer hiding. He could confront the complexities of the heart with honesty, and for now, that was enough. They stood silently, side by side, listening to the distant hum of the city at night. The world outside felt vast and unending, yet in that moment, Daniel understood that clarity was not a destination, it was a commitment, a promise to himself and to others that he would navigate life and love with honesty, reflection, and courage. And as he looked at Lucas, a quiet realization settled in: sometimes, the hardest yes is not given to another, but to oneself. The journey ahead would be challenging, unpredictable, and emotionally intricate, but for the first time, Daniel was ready to face it fully awake, fully honest, and fully present.